Welcome to the Preliminary Administrative Credential AXA final project. My name is Patricia Salazar. The school of focus for this project was my school, Lake Balboa College Prep. It is a K-12 span school in Lake Balboa. Our enrollment for K through 5 is 243. For 6 through 8 is 192. For 9 through 12 is 164. The total number of students at our school is 599. The administrative team consists of the principal, the assistant principal, the magnet coordinator, the counselor, and the TSP coordinator, which is my position. Our student demographics are 88% free or reduced meal plans, and 6.4% of our students are English learners. We are an all magnet school, and the one important dynamic of our school is that a lot of families can send all their students to one school, so there's a lot of students at our school that are either related or have family friends or our cousins, so there's a really great family feel at my school. So as noted earlier, our EL student population is not large. And the problem with that at our school is that because it isn't a large population, that group of students often doesn't get their needs met. Because they're not a huge population, so teachers don't necessarily understand that they have to provide additional supports to students who are English learners. So some of the data that we analyzed was CASP data. So for all of our students in math, 39% of all our students met or exceeded the CASP math in the 2018-19 school year. And in the 2017-18 school year, 41% of the students met or exceeded the math standards. And in the 2017-18 school year, 48.92% of the students met or exceeded the CASP beta. So if you compare from 2 years prior, from 48% to 39%, there's almost a 10% drop in our math scores. So that is already an issue just with all of our students. When we actually took apart the data and disaggregated it and looked at individual student subgroups, we were able to identify the English learner subgroup, and their decline, we noticed, was more dramatic. So in the 2018-19 school year, 9.09% of all English learner students met or exceeded the CASP math. And in the 2017-18 school year, 18% of the English learners met or exceeded. And in the 2017-18 school year, 7.89 of all English learner students met or exceeded. So again, our English learner population isn't large. However, when we looked at the data, they are the subgroup that's making the least progress in the CASP, math, and ELA scores. But for this particular project, I focused on the math. But the English learners are definitely in need of some supports in their academic program. So the problem of practice that was identified is that the English learner subgroup declined significantly in their math achievement in CASP and is in need of additional supports. And we conducted instructional rounds throughout this project, and the instructional rounds consisted of some of the admin team members but as well as other teachers. So when we did an instructional round of some of our math lessons, we did identify that the majority of the math lessons were being conducted whole group. Almost 90% of the teachers when we did the first round of instructional rounds were doing their math lessons whole group. And when we started looking at things that they were using, we didn't notice that there were a lot of visuals up in the room. There was a lot of vocabulary that was being used, but there was very little support all students need help with math vocabulary, but the English learners specifically need specific support to understand the math vocabulary because of the language barrier. And because we're a K through 12 school, so we looked at we looked at elementary, middle, and high school when we did our math instruction rounds, and we noticed in the elementary grades there was minimal use of manipulatives, which is using manipulatives is another great resource for students when they are doing math, because it's yet another tool that they can use to try to grasp the math concepts as they're doing the problems or working out anything that they're doing in math in particular. So that was one area that we noticed. Another area that we also noticed that needed some attention is during the grade level and department meetings. When teachers would meet, there wasn't necessarily a focus. It was more like a free-for-all. So we decided to start specifically stating that we are going to talk about not only math instruction, but our English learners during math instruction, during grade level and departments. It's actually an item on the agenda now. Because basically before there was no real agenda when teachers would meet with grade level department. And again, we are implementing this K-12 because all of our students in K-12 need additional supports in math instruction. Some of the collaborative structures that were put in place during this project were definitely following meeting norms. And I honestly didn't realize the importance of meeting norms, but they are really important because it makes everybody focused on what the purpose of the meeting is and how to behave with each other in terms of why they're meeting and what the purpose is and what they're supposed to get out of it. Another thing we started implementing is sending the grade level and department agenda several days ahead of time. And we started adding an objective and laying the foundation for specific items to discuss. Now, those items and the agenda is discussed in the prior meeting. That way teachers also have input on something that maybe they didn't get to that one week when they met, but they'll get to it the next week. So in our school, we have a K-12, we have an elementary lead teacher, and we have a secondary lead teacher. So those teachers are the ones that are in charge of sending out the agendas and getting input from the other teachers in terms of what they want to see on the agenda or what they need to talk about on the agenda. But again, as I mentioned before, EL and math instruction are two items on the agenda that are non-negotiable, like they have to be discussed, especially because of the data we found. So another thing we implemented was to appoint someone to keep track of the time and the minutes during grade level department meetings. For all teachers, it is really easy to drift and start discussing things that may not necessarily need to be discussed with the whole group. So we did appoint kind of a parliamentarian type position during the grade level and department meetings. That way teachers stay on topic and we utilize the time to its best ability is the bottom line. Because as soon as someone starts getting off track, then everybody loses track, and we want to make sure that teachers, when they are meeting at grade level, they are staying on track. Also, what we open the meetings with, and it's part of our norms, is keeping the focus on the students. The reason why we meet, the reason why we work so hard, the reason why we make adjustments in our instruction and even have these difficult discussions sometimes is to improve student achievement. And that's part of some of the the collaborative structures that we put in place, just keeping the focus on the students and their achievement, and making sure that we as a school community is meeting their needs. It doesn't just fall on one teacher. It has to be a whole community effort. And also creating an inclusive environment. So as sometimes it does happen when people disagree, or people maybe take offense to something someone said. So we're trying to maintain a safe environment so that everybody feels free to speak their mind and also be open to different ideas and suggestions. So we identified our problem practice. So now to tackle it, some of the things we're going to do is we're going to analyze the data, and we are going to analyze the data whole group, but also specifically looking at identifying our EL students, and specifically looking at EL student data. And we're going to use, we're going to use specific supports for English learners. So some of the things that we identified that we were going to use was using manipulatives. We purchased this program called iReady. It's like an intervention supplemental program to our already existing math program. And iReady is a program where teachers can make groups in the system. So they can make like our teachers that did iReady, they did an EL specific group. That way they can look at the group of students and they're just looking at the EL data. And that data tells them what specific standards they've mastered, what standards they need to work on, and also how much actual time they've done and how much practice they've done. So teachers have a slew of information in front of them, and it also generates parent reports, so we can send parent reports. And so iReady is an online program, so the students are able to access it at home as well as at school. So we definitely used a lot of the iReady data. Through the CAS system, there's also these interim assessments that we do periodically. So this year we only got to do 2 because before the shutdown. But we were able to look at some of the data and again specifically look at the EL students and their progress, and what we were looking at is if the students didn't do well on a particular interim assessment, there's an opportunity to retake it and actually break apart each problem, to take it apart and again figure out how to tackle it, how to solve the problem. Because some of these problems, because they're so vocabulary heavy and word heavy, it's really difficult for some of the EL students to actually even understand how to go about trying to solve it. So we used interim assessments that way. And we also utilized a teacher observing other teachers. So for our high school group, our group of math high school teachers, we have a comprehensive high school that's like walking distance from our school. So they went to that campus and they actually observed a math teacher with a large number of EL students. And the purpose of that was to help that teacher get some ideas and how to provide some strategies and support. Obviously, in a bigger comprehensive high school, there's a larger group of EL students, so it almost may be easier to provide supports, because when there's a bigger group, it's a lot harder in a high school math class when you've only got 2 or 3 ELs in your class, and you've got a whole class of students who aren't ELs. So providing those specific strategies that are that explicitly help our English learners is what the purpose of those observations were. Again, we have developed some collaborative structures. So teachers that may not necessarily have spoken so much, we made sure that we provided a protected time so they were able to collaborate and they were able to talk about concerns and things, but also specifically to the English learners and their math needs. And then if there was something that was discussed or something that the teacher said they were going to implement, in the agenda, we made sure that to write that in the agenda so that they are sure to follow up and revisit other topics discussed. We are really trying not to make it so that teachers meet and don't have anything to don't ever discuss what was discussed last week, which may have been a phenomenal idea, which may have worked well. So those follow-up meetings are also necessary in order to debrief and adjust your instruction, or even the opposite. If some strategy didn't work and it was horrible, then we could discuss how to make it better, or how to fix it, or how to readjust. So that's the purpose of the follow-up meetings. Some of the progress monitoring we did with the teachers was weekly check-ins. We also looked at student work samples as the work was being produced. We also gave timely feedback to teachers, that's very important because teachers have requested that personally, that they want the feedback and they want it to be timely so they can actually do something about their instruction in a quicker way. And we've created a safe environment to ask questions and express concerns, which is still a work in progress. That is something that continuously has to be worked on. I've been at that school for 3 years, and the collaboration hasn't necessarily been there. So it's been a little bit challenging on creating that and cultivating that environment where that it is safe to ask questions and ask for help as when needed, and then providing support and guidance as needed. So just always, I've tried to just be available for teachers as needed, and if they have any concerns, they know how to reach me, and if I don't have the answer, then I'm sure make sure I direct them to people that do have the answers. So some of the California standards for professional leaders that I definitely applied to this project were developing and implementing a shared vision, because there was no way that we could focus on the ELs and make them a focus of everybody unless I had the backing of the whole school community behind me. So the leadership was really good about supporting that. And then, of course, instructional leadership. So focusing on the culture, again, as I said earlier, providing that safe environment, cultivating that safe environment for teachers to be able to discuss and learn from each other, and also for the administration to be able to trust the teachers as they're working. And we did take a good hard look at our curriculum and our instruction, and again, we looked at assessment and accountability. For managing learning environments, so we did plan and provide procedures for the teachers in terms of when they met during their grade levels, and we had to make some adjustments there. And for climate, again, creating that environment where it is okay to ask questions, it is okay to make mistakes, not just for our teachers, but also for the teachers developing that kind of environment in their classroom during daily instruction. Some of the leadership framing items that stood out to me during this whole cycle were the 4 agreements: being impeccable with your word, not taking things personally, making assumptions, always doing your best. And again, these 4 agreements are really important in terms of students and their achievement, because if we all agree to be there for the right reasons, then being there for the students is, of course, the right reason, then of course the 4 agreements makes total sense. So the other one that was really influential was the ladder of inference. So actions, beliefs, and conclusions, meanings, and data. So the actions that I as a leader take, and then after looking at the data, beliefs, and conclusions, making meaning of all that, that's really important in terms of like making any changes or implementing any new strategies. And then the cycle of leadership, of course, to investigate, plan, act, and reflect. So we did have to do a lot of digging to find out, to identify what the specific problem was with the EL students. And sometimes it does take investigating and having these hard conversations, but I think planning and acting accordingly is necessary. And then there's always that time, that room for reflection, because nothing that you decide as a leader is ever going to be an easy decision. And sometimes things may be done easier at certain times than other times. So that reflection piece is really important. And my overall reflection at the end of all of this is students come first. And I do think instruction is really important, because if we do put students first, then the way that they are being taught every single day is really something that we should be looking at on a daily basis. And I think that as leaders, sometimes they get overwhelmed, and sometimes that may not necessarily be their focus, just because they get overwhelmed with the stuff that's non-instruction. But I think a leader, as much as possible, should make sure that they understand that instruction should come first. Well, students should come first, but their instruction should also be at the top of the priorities at a school site. And modeling lifelong learning, I think it's really important for a leader to model. You can't just walk the walk. You have to talk the talk. You have to walk the walk. And you can't just say you're a lifelong learner. You as a leader also have to be willing to learn with the teachers, and because they're always learning something new. So you should, as a leader, stick your nose in and find out what new thing it is that they're doing, and try to provide support. You may not necessarily understand it all, but you can provide support as much as possible. And then modeling behaviors you want to see in others. So if we want teachers to focus and pay attention in meetings, then the leaders need to also be at those meetings and pay attention and follow along and ask questions. So being an active participant, I think, is really important as a school leader. It's again modeling those behaviors you want to see. So if you want people to collaborate in your school, then you should be collaborating with them. If you want people to put students first, then make sure that whatever decisions that you are making are putting the students first. And the last one is being fluid. Things are ever changing at a school, and things are ever changing in education. So being fluid means always being willing to go with whatever it is, that go the direction where school is going, or where the leaders are taking us. Because it's really important to just to keep moving. Because if you don't keep moving, then you could be left behind. And then if you're left behind, then you're leaving the students behind. And some of my recommendations for the school is to continue to monitor EL data monthly, EL student data monthly, and also to increase communication with our EL parents, and to provide specific EL parent workshops so that the parents who have an English learner at home can have some ideas on what they can do at home to help their children, and to continue for the grade levels and departments to continue the structures during their meetings, and to hold conferences with parents of EL students as needed.